Um, I'm going to talk about a couple of things. One is what I see going on campuses. I've been speaking on campuses for the last several years often about education, but more and more often about the war and about organizing against the war. And I think I'll draw on last week. I was at Monmouth College for a day, which is in Western Illinois, a small liberal arts school, and I was invited to be part of a series that they call Interesting Person. And they have the freshman class. They have 6 people come for in the course of the year, and the entire freshman class attends a lecture and then interacts with this person. And my talk there was called Emancipate Yourselves from Mental Slavery, the Requirements of Living a Moral and Educated Life. And I took the line from Bob Marley's Redemption song, of course, and it was a really interesting interchange, not untypical of what I've experienced on other campuses, and so I want to draw on that. And the second thing I want to draw on is I've been involved for a couple of years in Chicago with a coalition of people who've been coming together around the theme of movement building. We've had what we've called the Movement Building Institute going every summer. And we had an event 2 weeks ago called a Festival of Democracy. And I want to describe that a little bit. Because I think it has, important perspectives for MDS, and I at least want to argue a perspective of how our work should move forward, both within MDS and beyond. And maybe to start, I'd like to just locate what I think the moment is we're living in. And there's kind of a couple of aspects to it that are worth mentioning. One is kind of a list that I have drawn up, and both of my comrades mentioned aspects of it. But this is not the whole story of what's going on in America, but it's, I think, an indisputable, very bright thread running through all of our efforts. And the way my list begins is like this: empire resurrected in the name of a renewed and powerful patriotic nationalism, war without end, announced and advertised. This war will never end, and that's what we're in for. Identification of opaque enemies as a unifying cause to bring us together. Unprecedented and unapologetic military expansion and militarism in the schools and in every aspect of civil life. White supremacy, intact and unyielding. Rampant sexism and organized campaigns to violate the rights of women and girls. Mass incarceration and disenfranchisement. Intertwining of religion and government. Unprecedented concentration of wealth. Overwhelming greed, putting planetary survival in question. The shredding of constitutional human rights and the hollowing out of any understanding of democracy. Corporate power unchecked. The creation of popular movements based on bigotry, intolerance, and the threat of violence, and the scapegoating of certain targeted and vulnerable groups, most notably around the issues of gender identity. Fraudulent elections, disdain for the arts, and for intellectual life generally. And I'll stop there so we don't all get completely depressed. And as I say, it's not the only story, but it's a story that has to be raised up and put together in a way that we can see that planetary survival and war without end and the targeting of gay and lesbian and transgendered people, all these things are part of a package. They're not separate things. And so when Tom talks about finding ways to link a multi-issue forward thrust, that is something I think we have to understand. The other thing that I want to note about the moment we're living in is that we're about to see the carnival of the national election come to town. Whenever the carnival comes to town, people like us are either depressed or unprepared for what's going to happen. But I can tell you, and I think you know, what's going to happen, which is we're going to not only get candidates who we can't stomach, and many of us, myself, all my life, I've held my nose and voted for the lesser of two evils at the last minute. I've never conflated that with democratic action, but I've always done it. My wife has never voted, and she finds it, appalling and I have to fight with her every year to show her that voting matters. It is a democratic right. It is something that we want. My favorite example of this when we were living in New York City was that we defeated a prison bond issue 25 years ago by the narrowest of margins because of downstate New York City votes, right? And Governor Kerry, and I said to Bernadine, see, I voted, my vote counted. You didn't vote, you're nuts. And 5 days later, Governor Kerry found the money to build the presidents anyway. And she said, see, it's a fraud. And you were outflanked, you idiot. And then 5 days after that, our brother-in-law, Haywood Burns, filed a lawsuit with the National Lawyers Guild and prevented prisons from being built for 10 years based on the vote. Does it matter? Doesn't it matter? You know, we can argue about this. It's not the center of the issue that I want to raise. What I want to raise, what's predictable, is that we'll get lousy candidates. And then, as the thing gets closer and people get more panicked about the outcome, droves of young people, hundreds of thousands of young people will pour into the campaign. And they'll pour into it without an analysis, without an understanding of what's going on, without the hope of coming out of it stronger and smarter, win, lose, or draw, and with the illusion that this is what it means to be politically active. That's the catastrophe. It's not that they shouldn't pour into things and get excited about one thing or another. It's that we leave the field open to kids from the University of Wisconsin. I guarantee you there'll be 5,000 kids from the University of Wisconsin canvassing the Midwest about whoever, Hillary, Barack, Edwards, whoever. But it won't lead to a deeper analysis, nor will it lead to a lifetime commitment of political activity. That's our challenge. Our challenge is to see the world we're living in, recognize that the festival, the carnival is coming to town, and figure out a way to get grassroots organizations linked together with a strategy so that when kids do come pouring into this, they have some place to go. And this is what we've been working on in Chicago for a couple of years, and I commend to you in Austin and New York and Ann Arbor, something like this. So let me tell you what we've done. What we've done is we've tried to build a conversation between labor, immigrant rights organizations, women's organizations, gay and lesbian rights organizations, grassroots organizations, NGOs, community organizers, academics, so that we can come together in a forum to do two things, really. One is to see the ways in which our issues link, that actually it is the case, as I said a minute ago, that planetary warming is all about war, and war is all about planetary warming. Seeing that connection is harder than it appears sometimes, and it takes analysis. But the analysis can't be done by some guru sitting in a think tank. The analysis has to be done through this kind of, in my view, through this kind of conversation among activists and among people who are mobilizing around issues. So this was the Festival of Democracy was very much based on that idea. So we had Rashid Khalidi from Columbia University, who's a brilliant Palestinian scholar and important, thinker about the Middle East. We had Rashid in conversation with Salim Muwakil, who's a local journalist and very involved in fights against racism and other domestic issues. And it was linking those conversations that made that hour, in particular, for example, very powerful. So I'm naming the moment we're in, and let me just say a couple of other things about what I think is required.